Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cancer Support Community Central Ohio's Natural Living Workshop with community herbalist Lily Cunning. We're very excited that Lily is joining us today, as she does every month on the fourth Tuesday at 9 a.m. For the Natural Living Workshop. And today she's going to be talking about medicinal gardening. And so, Lily, I am going to go ahead and do a screen share and be quiet myself now. And are you seeing the screen or are you seeing my
Yep.
pink flower?
Nope, I see the screen.
Perfect.
Welcome, everybody. So my name's Lily Cunning. I'm an herbalist, and one of the wonderful things about herbalism is that you can grow your own medicine and you can stay well with things that are not only really potent because you harvest them at their peak of potency, but they're also inexpensive. Often these types of medicines are perennials, so you buy it once and it just keeps coming back for you year after year. Um, and it gives you the power in your own hands to take your wellness into your own hands. So I'm a big proponent of gardening for medicine, and we're going to talk about all the different ways that you can do that. If you do not have a ton of land or a garden plot, this can be done at a community garden. This could be done in containers. This could be done inside the home, in the right spot. So we'll talk about all of those things to make it as accessible as possible for everyone. So let's get started. All right, so today we're going to talk about what you might want to grow in terms of the different types of herbs and what they're used for. And then you can start making a short list of like, oh yeah, I want that one. Oh yeah, that sounds good. And what grows well in your area. Now, I don't know where everyone is located. If you want to type in the chat, I don't know if all of you are in Columbus or not, or if folks are in the surrounding areas. Columbus and sort of the central Ohio region is generally in USDA zone 6A. Some of you might be in 6B, depending on how far away from Columbus you are. Delaware, okay, that's 6A. We're going to talk about zones and how you figure out what worked well in your area, and also what grows in your location. Are you all shady? Do you have certain trees on your property? What's your water like? Is it very dry? What kind of soil do you have? All of those things. And then importantly, herbs are a fantastic companion plant to your edibles. Now, I remember when I was growing up, having a garden in the backyard meant tomatoes and cucumbers mostly. And if you've got edibles planned, you can grow herbs as companion plants to keep away certain kinds of pests, to attract certain kinds of pollinators, to make them taste better. Yes, herbs can make your tomatoes taste better. All kinds of things. So we're going to talk about that. And then creating a plan and sourcing your seedlings or seeds, because where they come from is important. One of the things you should know is that just picking things up at a big box store, whether that's Walmart or Lowe's, a lot of those plants have been treated with neonicotinoid pesticides and herbicides, and they actually kill pollinators, and they're not very good for you either. So I never get my garden things, whether I'm going to eat it or take it as medicine, from big box stores. I have really great sources, and we'll talk about that at the end. So with that said, what might you want to grow? So very common types of herbs. So I'm going to talk about medicinal actions of herbs. In other words, how those herbs work in the systems of the body. So a common action that people have heard of is anti-inflammatory, right? So reducing inflammation is an action that many herbs have. Antihistamine, right? Blocking those histamine responses that your body creates in response to an allergen or even things that you're not allergic to, like pollution. There's different kinds of actions like adaptogens. Now, some people may know what adaptogens are if you've been like looking at different wellness products and stuff, but you might not know. And let me just tell you really quickly, an adaptogen is generally safe for all people, regardless of what pharma they may be on or what kind of treatment plan. It gives overall wellness. It usually hits one or two systems of the body most, but it is helping you to achieve a state of healthy homeostasis. One of the more commonly known adaptogens is ginseng, right? It gives vitality and energy, and it also normalizes a lot of body functions. And when your body is in imbalance, like surviving cancer or getting cancer treatment, helping your body restore that balance and a healthy homeostasis is invaluable. And regardless of whether you yourself have cancer or you're a caregiver for someone with cancer, adaptogens are great for people living under stress. And, medical issues cause a lot of stress, whether that's being an advocate for yourself or someone you love, or, navigating the uncertainty of illness. Adaptogens are fantastic for stress. Speaking of stress, you may want nervine sedatives. So what those are is they work on the nervous system to calm things down. Chamomile, what Darlene was mentioning, chamomile is a nervine sedative, among other things. It's calming. It could help you get some sleep. It could relax your muscles. Like there's a bunch of things that nervine sedatives do. So there's a lot of different kinds, and we're going to talk about those. So let's move on to the next slide. So let's see. Madison County, Ohio, Delaware, Ohio. So we've gotten two answers. I'm assuming everybody else is in Columbus or the Columbus area. Yeah, your screen is going to show me really small. It's going to show the presentation bigger, because that's the important thing. I'm less important than what we're talking about. So in your zone, what that means is, what is the first and last frost? That's how the USDA defines an agricultural zone. And some agricultural zones, don't have very much frost at all, if any. And so they are down there at the bottom, that orange color. And the lowest temperatures are like 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The Bay Area, where I used to live, you could grow things year round and it wasn't a big deal. But now that I live in West Virginia and formerly Ohio, you can see we are in that green section, which is zone 6. Now that means that we definitely have a seasonal plan in mind when we're planting, right? We need to make sure that our plants don't go in the ground until after the last frost, which is usually sometime after Mother's Day. Sometimes people wait an extra week or so beyond that. Some people even wait until after Memorial Day to put things in the ground, because it's so disappointing to take care of all these little plant babies, put them in the ground, and then have them die because it frosts. Now, that said, this is all based on historical data, and we are in an unprecedented time of climate change. So, definitely tracking things yourself and looking at forecasts, as well as looking at historical data like USDA zones and historical data for last frost is important these days. I'm probably going to be conservative, grow my things inside until after Memorial Day, just because, man, that polar vortex was weird. And then we were having 70-degree days and then below freezing days, and it was all crazy and wonky doodle. So I don't trust the historical data anymore. So I don't want to lose my plant babies, especially since I'm growing a whole lot this year for food and medicine. So I'm going to wait until after Memorial Day, personally. It's hard to wait that long. But why grow medicine, right? A lot of medical care is inaccessible to people. We have so many uninsured and a lot more underinsured people in this country. And if you don't have access to things that keep you well, you are kind of riding a dangerous wave there. It is also affordable. For perennials, you plant it once, you're going to get year after year of medicine. $5 to $7 for a seedling, or $5 for a packet of seeds, will last you a very long time. It's a great investment in yourself. And it's sustainable. You grow these plants and you take what you need, you leave the rest for wildlife, you leave the rest for next year. If you over harvest, you can always compost or feed it to backyard chickens, or give it to the wildlife. It is so sustainable. Unlike synthesized drugs, which are a major source of pollution, commercial pollution, this is a completely sustainable endeavor that you can do on a small or large scale. And we're going to talk about that. So let's move on. So let's talk about our medicinal needs. What I would like to hear from y'all in the chat is, what kinds of things are you looking to grow? Actually, let me rephrase that. What kinds of conditions are you looking to treat, right? So do you have migraines? Are you respiratorily compromised? Do you have asthma or COPD, or do you constantly get bronchitis? Do you have seasonal allergies? Do you have IBS or some sort of digestive issue? Are you prone to joint pain or, soft tissue injury? Do you have reproductive issues like cystic ovaries or cramping? Or, do you need emotional regulation? Are you depressed or anxious and you're looking for a nice balance? Do you get infections really easily? Diabetics, for example, are very easily getting infections, and so that might be something that you want. Are you looking to relax, right? As we probably all are. So let me see what we've got here. Asthma, okay. Depression and anxiety, joint pain, allergies, fertility, thyroid, okay, got it. Body aches, breast cancer, fatigue, insomnia. Yep. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, keep them coming. I will just start speaking to things. And if you hear, I'm gonna talk about each category, and go ahead and write down those herbs that apply to you. So for pain and inflammation, so there are analgesics, which stop pain response, and then there's anti-inflammatories, which reduce the inflammation response, because inflammation is often a source of pain. For example, rheumatoid arthritis, where you have swelling of the joints to the point of pain. The body is creating that inflammation response that isn't necessary, right? Sometimes our immune systems kind of go wonky and they start making an inflammation response or a histamine response when it's not warranted, and the symptoms are terrible. So managing those symptoms is important, as well as getting to the root cause. So for pain, many people are aware that the first pain relievers, aspirin, for example, those were sourced directly from plants. The most sustainable way to get salicylic acid, which is the thing that aspirin is through a plant called meadowsweet, which grows really well in all the zones here that people are in. Meadowsweet is also sustainable because you're going to be taking leaves and stems rather than the root. When I'm giving you recommendations, I'm going to tell you about different plants, and I'm also going to tell you what part of the plant gets used. My preference is for as sustainable medicine as possible, so I'm going to avoid a lot of roots unless they are cultivated, and I'm going to avoid bark. So another source of salicylic acid that I'm not going to recommend to you is willow bark. Now, when there's bark medicine, it's the inner bark, it's not the outer bark. And so you cut down a limb and you strip away the outer bark, and then there's this really thin layer between the bulk of the wood and the outer bark, and that's the medicinal part. Well, because it's such a small part of the plant, and because it's a tree, it's been unsustainably harvested. So I don't recommend getting white willow bark. It is endangered. And so meadowsweet is a fantastic source of salicylic acid. It is an herb. So like you're just growing a really pretty green plant with pretty flowers. So I recommend that. You also can have muscle relaxers for pain. Valerian root is a sustainable way of managing muscle pain and cramping. And it is a root, which means that if you're growing it, you need to let it go for a couple years before harvesting it. So it's an investment, right? Roots are harder to use as medicine than aerial plants. But the other thing for pain that I would recommend are things like anti-inflammatories. My favorite ever anti-inflammatory is stinging nettles. And I don't know if folks have experience with stinging nettles, maybe as a kid getting stung. They have these little hairs on them, particularly on the underside of the leaves and on the stem. And when you touch them, they feel very stingy, and then it causes like a rash in some people. I don't actually get the rash, but those little hairs are full of those antihistamines. And so one thing that people used to do when they had gout or rheumatoid arthritis and they had these big swollen joints that hurt really bad and they couldn't get around is they would take, a handful of these stinging nettles and actually beat themselves, flagellate themselves with stinging nettles because they would get the rash, but then all of that histamine response would go down and the swelling would go down. You don't have to beat yourself with them. You can ingest them instead. And when you use them in tea or in food, and they are delicious, by the way, they don't have the stinging when you're eating them, right? When you cook them, the stinging goes away, but the property is still there. The other thing that you like, people bake with stinging nettles and it produces the beautiful green color. Like, you should Google stinging nettle cake. It is beautiful. And soup, stinging nettle soup is really delicious. And it's incredibly nutritious. So like, not only are you getting the anti-inflammation properties and antihistamine properties too, because it stops both of those immune responses. So like if you have seasonal allergies, man, stinging nettles is the best. It's also really nutritious. It's got more vitamins and minerals and chlorophyll than any land plant, period. So while it's stingy, you could plant it somewhere that's kind of out of reach and then just harvest it with gloves. When I had a little shop in Columbus, I planted stinging nettles underneath a window that I felt was vulnerable to break-ins. And no break-ins in that window, I tell you what. You could do it in a side yard, for example. The other thing about stinging nettles is the seeds when they go to seed, and you might want to cut the seeds so that it doesn't spread because it is a very successful plant at reproducing itself. If you cut the seeds and you have urinary issues, the seeds, making a tea, like crushing the seeds, they're very tiny, and making a tea of that and drinking that regularly will alleviate a lot of urinary tract issues. So that's also great. I love stinging nettles. Can you tell? Calming. So for people with anxiety or panic attacks, a quick calming herb is really great. I would recommend chamomile, and chamomile tea, don't knock it. Like if you've had chamomile tea from a grocery store, you've not had chamomile tea. If you grow your own chamomile flowers, there are so many more constituents in that flower that you have never had. It is calming supreme. They give it, and it's very gentle. They give it to babies all over the world. So chamomile also grows really well in zone 6A. The other favorite calming herb that I love that has multiple purposes is lemon balm. Now, lemon balm is in the mint family, so it is also wildly successful at propagating itself. So plant it with care, right? Because it's going to get bigger and spread out. But it is delicious. It has this lovely citrus taste. And not only is it a calming herb, but it is also an antiviral herb, one of the more powerful antivirals. When people have the flu, when people have cold sores, when people are, suffering with COVID, I give them lemon balm. I love it, and I harvest as much as I can while still preserving the plant for next year. And whatever surplus I can't use, I make into medicine immediately. I steep it in oil and I steep it in alcohol, and then it's preserved for years. With the oil, I'll make a lip balm for cold sores for people. And with the alcohol, you can just take that throughout the winter when you no longer have fresh or dried herb for tea. And it tastes yummy. So that's good. German or Roman, they both have medicinal properties. I prefer German. I think it grows better here, which there's something to be said for that. So when we were talking about lemon balm being an antiviral, the other antiviral that I recommend is elderberry, elderflower. So elderberry is a powerful antiviral, and it also boosts the immune system. Elderflower, if you harvest it before the berries, is amazing for the lungs. So it is a great plant all around. But there are two types of elder. There's Sambucus nigra, which is the European version, and then there's the version that grows even better here on this continent, and that is Sambucus canadensis. And it's, from Canada all the way down, like the East Coast and the Midwest. It grows fantastic here. So if you're going to grow elderberry, and it's a bush, so give it some space, I recommend getting canadensis. Let's see. Antihistamines, I mentioned stinging nettles. That is like the best. Eyebright is also another herb that you can grow, and you're going to use the aerial parts for it, which has really great antihistamine properties. Antimicrobial, so that's broad spectrum. Like there's antivirals, there's antibacterials, and then there are rare plants that are both. So we talked a little bit about lemon balm and elder being antiviral. Antibacterial things include garlic, which is delicious. So who wouldn't want to grow garlic? The thing about garlic is that you need to plant it in the fall and then harvest it the following year. So usually what I do is in the spring, I have a seedling and seed sale. And then in the summer, I have a fall bulb and bare root sale, things that you would plant in the fall for the following year. So definitely, ping me on my website. That'll be available later to get on a list. I will let you know when that launches so that you can get fall things. But garlic is fantastic. Other antimicrobials are anything that has berberine. Now, the most common plant that we know of that has berberine is also endangered, and that is golden seal, because it is a root and it is a forest perennial. It does not like growing cultivated at all. And so it's been over harvested. So I don't recommend golden seal, but Oregon grape also has a high amount of berberine in it. It's the thing that makes it yellow, as does barberry. I recommend Oregon grape because it grows really easily. And it is a grape plant. So you're going to have these little tiny grapes, which is also nice. Let's see, immune boosting. I mentioned elder. That's a really great one. Another one, which is native to Ohio, is echinacea. Now, there are two kinds of echinacea. There's echinacea purpurea and there's echinacea angustifolia. One is from Europe, one is native. The angustifolia is the one that grows really well in Ohio and is native. And whenever possible, I recommend people grow natives. And then as a secondary, grow things that grow well in your zone that maybe aren't native, but you need medicinally, and keeping it contained. So those are some antimicrobial things and immune boosting things. Adaptogens. So I mentioned the magic that is adaptogens. The easiest to grow adaptogen and is super delicious in tea is Tulsi. Tulsi is also called holy basil. And there are many varieties of Tulsi. It is a holy plant in India. Many of them are dedicated to a specific deity, like there's Krishna Tulsi and there's Rama Tulsi. It is freaking delicious, and you don't even need to sweeten your tea. If you put Tulsi in your tea along with other things, it's going to be delicious and palatable without any kind of sweetener. It is A really wonderful adaptogen that's also really great at stabilizing blood sugar and calming. Other adaptogens that are actually fairly easy to grow if you have it in a container and you take it inside when it starts to get cold, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is one of my favorite adaptogens to take because if you take it every day, not only does it normalize your body functions and help you cope with stress, it also makes sure that you get a good night's sleep. And when you are sick or when you are stressed, I don't know why, but sleep tends to be the first thing to go, right? And you need it the most. So ashwagandha is one of my favorite adaptogens. Ginseng is also another adaptogen that is native to the area, but you need to cultivate it yourself. Most sources are not sustainable. It is an endangered plant. Human beings are very short-sighted, I must say. Um, but you can grow ginseng in the shade of trees. If you have trees on your property and nothing else will grow there, ginseng would love it there. Just protect it, because if people see it, they're going to be like, ooh, and they're going to want to take it. So protect your ginseng. Um, Digestive plants. So we mentioned chamomile, we also mentioned lemon balm, and we also mentioned tulsi. All of these have digestive properties that calm the stomach, deal with gas and bloating. I would also say, let's see, what else would I recommend? Any of the culinary herbs, the ones that are really full of essential oils like dill or basil, fantastic for calming the stomach. You can make a tea of it. When you're having digestive issues, tea is probably your best bet for medicine, because you're having the tissue that is upset in the gut coming in direct contact with an extract of plant, right? The water is an extraction of that plant. Oh, and I forgot my very favorite one when we were talking about antimicrobials. My favorite herb in the whole world is thyme. Thyme, right? Thyme kills more pathogens than bleach. It kills both viruses and bacteria in lab tests. They're starting to make hand sanitizers just of thyme, no alcohol at all. And you can eat it, unlike bleach. Don't listen to Donald Trump. You can't eat bleach, but you can eat thyme, and it's good in everything. I put it in eggs, I put it on chicken. Like, thyme goes in everything I cook practically. And it is really powerful, and it grows really well. Like, there's all kinds of varieties of thyme. You can get lemon thyme, or that's one of my favorites, lemon thyme. But the common garden thyme, Thymus vulgaris, is also really easy to grow. So definitely recommend some thyme. Sorry for backpedaling. Emotional support. So there's two ways to get emotional support. There's the nervine sedation, which is calming when you're freaked out. But if you have depression, you may not want to use nervine sedatives because you're already depressed. So what I would recommend is adaptogens. Tulsi, like I said, really fosters, and I would combine that Tulsi. My favorite tea in the whole world when I'm freaking out is Tulsi and rose petals. Growing roses, and not just like beautiful roses, but roses that are medicinal. The roses that I recommend to grow for medicine are in the rugosa family, Rosa rugosa. And they're bush plants, and they're not as beautiful, like in a floral florist kind of way, but they are very pretty, and they smell amazing, and they're full of constituents that are helpful. Tulsi and rose as a combination is like a hug in a cup. I kid you not. Like, when I'm upset, Tulsi rose is where it's at. Muscle repair. The thing to grow is arnica. And let me tell you, you want to grow it because it is expensive to buy, and it fluctuates wildly. The other last month, I tried to buy some arnica petals. It was like hundreds of dollars a pound. No way, Jose. It grows really well in the area. It needs direct sun. It looks kind of like a yellow daisy type flower, Asteraceae. But again, you want to grow it yourself because it is too expensive to buy. And arnica is not for ingesting. It is for topical application. So you're going to want to extract it in oil, for maybe as a massage oil, maybe to make it into a salve by adding beeswax to that oil. But arnica is amazing. Let's see what else. Respiratory. Okay, so Central Ohio is rife with respiratory problems. So many people have asthma or COPD. The thing that I would recommend more than anything else is elecampane. Now, you use the root of elecampane, but it grows really fast and you're able to plant it and harvest it all in the same year and just grow it again. Grow it as an annual, even though it is a perennial. Elecampane roots support bronchial health. They are stabilizing and nourishing. And I have gotten people that were having multiple nebulizing treatments a day and were constantly on steroidal inhalers to no longer need their nebulizing treatments, and only when they were under extreme duress would they need their inhaler, and when an attack would come on. So it is amazing. I highly recommend elecampane. Also, mullein. Now, most people know mullein as that weed off to the side of the road. It's got the really big, fuzzy, pale green leaves. And every other year, it's a biennial, so it's kind of a quirky little plant. It grows a really tall stalk that has little yellow flowers growing all over it. Now, the leaves are what you want to use for respiratory stuff. They are a fantastic lung support, expectorant. If you've got too much mucus, they dry up the excess mucus. And they're just really great lung support. But the flowers, every other year, if you're growing mullein, the flowers are a fantastic anti-inflammatory, and they're super expensive to buy because, again, you only get them every other year in the plant, and they're really delicate. You have to get them while they're out because in a couple days they just fall off the stalk. So mullein flowers, you get 2 for 1. It's great. Cardiac. So there are a couple supreme herbs for cardiovascular issues. The first one is hawthorn berries. Now, hawthorn is a tree, so that is a big investment. But if you know where there are hawthorn trees, you can collect the berries. There are lots of hawthorns in the Midwest. And I highly recommend books like, see, I've got the background on. This one's called Tree Finder, and it literally is sort of a choose your own adventure where it's like, does the leaf look like this? And then it's like, go to page 5. Or another book is What's That Tree? And that's also a really great identifier. Get to know your land and get to know the land surrounding you, because I used to go over to Whetstone Park when I lived in Clintonville, and I would find all kinds of amazing things. So yeah. And then there's another book, The Winter Weed Finder, which is really great if you're sort of getting used to a place, but you're there in the fall or winter after everything's died back. This helps you identify what's there so that you can come back the following year. So hawthorn is the one I'd recommend. There is an herb that you can grow called Arjuna, which is more of a shrub, and it's from India, and it is their version of hawthorn. And ironically, both of them have this deep blood, oxblood red color to the berry and to the extract when you do it. I think that's very indicative of the doctrine of signatures. Nervous system disorders. So if you've got something like Parkinson's or MS, what you want is not necessarily nervine sedation, like the calming things that we talked about before, but it is things like oat. Yes, oat. Eating oatmeal regularly, and please source your oats carefully, because most oats that you buy at the grocery store contain traces of glyphosate. Which is an herbicide and a carcinogen, and should have been banned in the United States, as it has been banned elsewhere, but has not. So I always buy 100% organic oats, but also oat straw. Milky oat tops is a supreme nerve tonic. So if you grow oats and you harvest them, when you squeeze the little tops of the oats and the little milky sap comes out, that is the time to harvest those and extract them. I extract them as a tincture, which means alcohol and water, and then I have it for like years, right? It is the best nervine tonic for people that have nervous system disorders. Taking it daily. It tonifies the nervous system, it normalizes the nervous system, less tremors, less issues, right? More firing. The other nervous system thing is if you have neurotransmitter issues, St. John's wort. Now, St. John's wort, the most powerful stuff is in the flowers, but you need to check if you're on any kind of medication, whether that's hormonal birth control, SSRIs, HIV medicine. There's a bunch of medicines where St. John's wort is prohibited. Like you don't want to mess around. But St. John's wort, if you're not taking those things, is amazing. The reason that they tell you not to take them is because it does the same thing, and you don't want your actions to go too far in one direction, right? So what was the nervous system disorder herb before St. John's wort? That was oats, milky oat tops. And then reproductive. Raspberry leaves, so you get the berries, yum, and the leaves you can use for a uterine tonic. The other thing that I highly recommend is Vitex, Agnus castus, chasteberry it's also called. It is a large shrub eventually, but it takes a while to grow, but the berries are a hormonal regulator. If you've got a hormonal issue, whether that's menopause, dysmenorrhea, PMS, PCOS, if you've got polycystic ovary syndrome, Vitex will cause what is optimum to occur. It works on the anterior pituitary gland, making sure that the right hormones get released in the right time. So it's a regulator. I love Vitex. I think it's great. It's gotten me through a couple scrapes in my day. So did I answer everyone's questions? Did I address everyone's specific issues? Because we've got all kinds of cultivation stuff to talk about.
Can I ask a quick question? Oh,
Yeah,
so
of
sorry.
course.
I was just going to ask, in terms of growing these herbs, do you have, sorry, what's the right word? Do you have a, wow, sorry, does it matter if you grow it in the ground or if you do like a big planter's box to keep it off of the ground so like my dogs can't get in them? Does that matter to you?
So I would say it's situational. If you have really good soil and you've had it tested, go ahead and plant it right in the ground. We just moved to a farm and we're going to go ahead and plant raised beds because our soil is really acidic and high in clay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make what's called hugelkultur beds. We're going to build the frame, and then we're going to fill it in with a lot of logs that have fallen because we have 12 acres of woods and a bunch of like debris, fallen leaves and stuff. And then we'll put soil on it and it all starts to decay over the year. And then you add more to it, when you get your compost or whatever. But we're going to go ahead and do that because we want to get started right away. We don't want to have to wait a couple years to amend our soil. But we are in the process of amending the soil as well. But if you've got animals that like to dig or poop, you definitely want to keep them out of it. If you've got deer, as we all tend to have, protecting your plants from deer. One of the things that's great about growing herbs is if you grow the stinky ones, the ones that we find aromatic, but deer are very sensitive. Look at those big sniffers they've got. Planting them on the outside of your garden can repel predation from deer often. So it just depends on what your situation is. We're going to plant directly in the ground in some places, and we're going to have raised beds in the back, and we've already got beds built in the front. So, we're going to do a little bit of everything this year. And then skin conditions. I see that the best thing to grow for all kinds of skin conditions is calendula, also known as pot marigold. It is a beautiful, cheerful flower. And you grow it and you can use it topically. You can also use it internally. You can steep it in oil and use it as a massage oil or use it as the base for salve. You can tincture it, you can make a tea. And when you make the tea, you can take it both internally and you can wash with it. So if you've got a weeping rash, for example, steeping calendula in water and then, using it as a wash periodically on that area is better than the oil. You don't want to use an oil-based product, whether that's a salve or an oil on broken skin. Use the wash, and then once it heals up, you can move to an oil because then it penetrates more and you get even more in. But I would highly recommend calendula for anyone that has sensitive skin, anyone that has eczema, anyone that has rashes, contact dermatitis, things like that. The one thing I will say is that if you have constant rashes, there is something going on that you need to look at. Your skin doesn't react that way for no reason. Eczema is usually a dietary issue, and the most common culprit is dairy products. So I would look at that and eliminating dairy for 3 months and seeing if that changes your skin, because it takes about 3 months for skin, which is the last organ of elimination, to clear once you stop giving it things that it doesn't like. If it's psoriasis, that's an autoimmune disease, and I would highly recommend an internal regimen of adaptogens as well as topicals to treat the symptom. Topicals alone for an autoimmune disease will not work. It's only symptom management. It won't get rid of the underlying cause. So that's what I say about skin conditions. Anything else? Ooh, we're getting close. I'm going to have to zip through the rest, man. I talked a lot about medicine, didn't I? Sorry. Companion plants. The reason to plant things together instead of neat rows of only one thing is it provides shelter for plants that need shade. It provides support for plants that need to climb. It attracts beneficial insects if you pair them correctly. It improves the soil if you plant correctly, and you can plant decoy plants. If the most valuable crop you have are tomatoes and you really want all those tomatoes, you plant something that tomato hornworm will go for instead. Now, the most common companion planting is shown here. It's called the Three Sisters: beans, corn, and squash. So the squash grows on the ground and stomps out any competition for resources, right? Like what we call weeds. I'm a big fan of weeds. Beans use the corn stalk to grow up because they need a trellis. This is a common agricultural technique passed down from native peoples here on this continent, because all those plants are native to this continent. So companion planting ideas. Grow plants that prefer similar conditions together. Plant fast growers with slow growers to maximize your space, especially if you're limited in your bed size. Making sure that you're able to harvest things in a staggered way and maximizing that space and replanting once you've harvested some things is really great. Keeping plants prone to similar diseases away from each other. You don't want to cause a big cataclysm of blight. So keeping those things apart to make sure that you're spreading out the possibility of having things get disease. Growing taller plants to provide shade for leafy greens and lettuces is a fantastic idea. You don't want to scorch your lettuce, so grow it under sunflowers or amaranth or any of those tall plants. Separate plants that impede each other's growth, and then plant to improve the soil for future crops, things that are nitrogen fixing. So things that bring nitrogen to the area can be plowed under and left there so that the soil benefits next year from high nitrogen. Next, what grows in your plot? So what I encourage you to do is to look at where you're going to grow. So if it's outdoors, you want to look at the sun and shade situation. If you have trees on your property, not just trees looking at them as shade, but look at what kind of trees you have as far as type. If you don't know, find out, because trees, as we will find out in a few minutes, are the landscape boss. Trees determine what grows well on a property. Their roots extend really far beyond what you can see, and they exude phytochemicals to make sure certain kinds of plants that they like succeed and plants that they don't like don't. So looking at the type of trees on your property, and I will recommend some books in a minute to help you with this process. Also, how much moisture do you have on your land? Is it very swampy? Is it very dry? Is it very rocky? Like all of those things will tell, determine what kind of plants are going to do well in their root systems. And how much rainfall do you get? In Ohio and West Virginia, we don't tend to worry about those things. In other areas, who boy, they have to worry about those things. Also, when the first and last frost are, that's your USDA zone. We covered that in the beginning. That's really good. I have some books to recommend on what plants do well in what areas. And then what things are you already growing? Again, companion planting is great. One thing I will always grow with my tomatoes is yarrow. Yarrow is native to the area. It's a plant that has beautiful little white flowers. Don't get the colored yarrow, get the wild type yarrow, Achillea millefolium. And it's got little white flowers. Not only is it styptic, so it stops bleeding, anti-hemorrhagic, stops internal bleeding, but it's also antimicrobial. Really great plant, good for lots of things. And it makes tomatoes taste better when they grow side by side. Just saying. Trees, I said, they are the landscape boss. So a great resource for determining what to plant in the ground. This doesn't apply to raised beds or container planting, obviously. But if you are going to be planting in the ground, look at the trees on your property. The book that I recommend is coming up. It's called Restoration Agriculture, because trees are the boss. Next. There we go. So here are some combinations that go really well together. So tomatoes and cabbage go really well together because it repels the diamondback moth. Carrots and tomatoes, or carrots and leeks, are really great together. And there's lots of different reasons why you would want to do companion planting. These are mostly edibles. But I have another list that I think I have a whole list of handouts that I sent to Darlene, and some of them are herbs, some of them are edibles, and some of them are herbs and edibles together. And you're also going to get a copy of this slideshow. So don't feel like you have to furiously take those notes. The only notes you really needed to take were which plants would do well for your situation. Let's move on. Herbs for shady places. This is the most common question I get. They're like, oh, my whole backyard is in shade. And I'm like, okay, well, these particular plants do great in shady places. And they are very medicinal. Feverfew is my #1 go-to for migraine headaches. It's also good for other kinds of headaches, but it's exceptional for migraines. Catnip is good for digestion. It's good for calming, and it is great for cats. Valerian, like I said, it's a root thing, so you need to let it grow for a couple years before you harvest it, but you could always have a valerian plant going and harvest the other one. It is a nervine sedative. It is a muscle relaxer. It helps people get to sleep like nobody's business. Anise hyssop, delicious, digestive, and sweet, very sweet for a tea. Like if you grow anise hyssop and you have it for tea, I think you'll always grow anise hyssop for tea because it's really lovely. Meadowsweet was the plant that I recommended for pain relief. It's also anti-inflammatory. And mint, any kind of mint. The thing you need to know about mint is that it is highly successful, so it will spread. So if you have a whole area that you just don't want to mow anymore, plant mint. Because honestly, mint only grows so high, and it spreads. It will choke out even the most stubborn of grass eventually. And if you do end up mowing it, your whole neighborhood is going to smell lovely. But mint is a digestive, it's a coolant, tastes delicious, it's good in food, it's good in beverages. I highly recommend growing mint. Wood betony is a pain reliever. Lemon balm is a calming herb that is also antiviral. I love it. And medicinal mushrooms. Now here's something that maybe we haven't talked about it because we've been talking about the plant kingdom and not the fungi kingdom. But mushrooms have a lot of medicine, certain types. The one that I would recommend anyone grow is reishi, Ganoderma lucidium. Reishi, there are indigenous reishis that grow in Ohio and West Virginia. I found some on my property, super psyched about it. but you inoculate logs. You drill holes in logs and you put the spores in there and cover them up with wax and let it do its thing. And eventually you will see fruiting bodies. It'll spread throughout the log, it's mycelium, and then you'll see the fruiting body, the little, looks like a toadstool kind of. And then you can take those and use them for medicine. And they are adaptogens, they are immunomodulators. So people who are undergoing cancer treatment, you could take reishi and it will help your immune system find the best response. It's not an immune booster. So, I know that folks with cancer are to avoid immune boosters. It is a regulator. So it is a fantastic normalizing mushroom that can be grown here and there in Ohio.
Lily, we have a question. To make teas with these, do you brew fresh leaves or dry them or both?
Both, but the ratio will be different depending on if you're using fresh or dried. Just like in cooking, if you use a dried herb, they tell you to use a little less because the moisture has evaporated out of the herb, but everything else is concentrated. So if you use fresh herb, I recommend a 1-to-2 ratio, 1 part plant, 2 parts water. If you use dried herb, I recommend a 1-to-5 ratio, 1 part plant, 5 parts water. So if you are interested in growing medicine, you don't have to get plants or seeds from me, but you can, and they are at a discount. Anyone who's attended this can mention this class on the form. And I'm going down to United Plant Savers and Companion Plants with my herb students at the end of April. I do this every year. It's a really great field trip for herb students. And Companion Plants is one of 2 medicinal herb nurseries in the country. And we are blessed to have it in Athens, Ohio. So I go down there every year. I take pre-orders from people that take this class from me and from my students and from community members. Feel free to pass this link on. And I'm just trying to promote medicinal gardening. I think it's fantastic for the community. I think it's fantastic for individual health. You can scan the QR code or you can, type in that URL at the bottom of the page. What I will do is at the end of April, I will pick up all of the orders that people have submitted, and then I will bring them back. I have a class in Columbus, Ohio, so I will leave seedlings with one of my herb students there for prompt pickup by people who pre-order. If you order seeds, I'll probably just mail them to you when I get them, because that's easy to do. And if you are in West Virginia, you'll be able to pick up seedlings from my farm. But yeah, I go down every year. It is the most amazing place. If you ever get down to Athens, check it out. It's kind of up in the hills on the periphery of Athens, but Peter, the owner, has been doing this since the 70s, and he's got so many plants. It's amazing to see. It's a fun field trip. All right, so a little bit about me while we have a chance. So I am an herbalist. I have a clinical practice. I teach classes like this one, and then also teaching herbalists. And I just founded a new school called Root and Rhizome, which is a school of folkways. So that includes herbalism, but it also includes a class like I just taught cold weather chicken keeping, and things like that. Anything that is a life skill that we unfortunately have seemed to lose for sustainable living, that's what Root and Rhizome does. So I'm not the only teacher, but it is something that I just started. So Lily Cunning Community Herbalist will become my clinical practice only, and my classes will be taught out of Root and Rhizome. I also am the key formulator for Haven Herbs. Whoops, there we go. It's opposite. I have to point the other way. Haven Herbs, which is a worker-owned herbal apothecary. And then that one down there, Resource, that's the name of my farm. So that's what all of that is on my background. Just wanted to tell you a little bit about me and the things that I do. I think we have another slide. Oh yes, the gardener resources. So Sunset National Garden Book is good for the entire country. You can also get like Midwest Garden Book. It might be appropriate for you, but it goes over not only the zones and how to plant, but Every plant has a cultivation profile. It's amazing. I highly recommend Sunset. It's a magazine that is a West Coast magazine, but they publish this gardening book for all the different zones and the national. The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer, if you want to go and take a deep dive into medicinal herb growing, that is the book. It's one of very few, but it's the best one. And then Restoration Agriculture is that book that I talked about that tells you the trees, what grows well with what tree. Most people know like black walnut doesn't like a lot of things. Well, this book will give you a list of what is good if you have black walnut in your area. So, and then Wellness in Weeks. So this is a coaching program that I have. It is for people with chronic issues and pain. If you are interested in more wellness in your life, each month we have a webinar. Each week you will receive an email with homework and videos and lessons, things to transform. We spend a whole month on diet and nutrition, a whole month on sleep hygiene, things like that. So it's a 6-month program. And if you register, $100 of each registration goes to Cancer Support Community. So the link is down there and the QR code as well. Feel free to ask me about it. You can send me an email if you have questions, but that page has a lot of information on it about that class. And there you go. That is me and what I do. And we are ending with 4 minutes. So I am happy to answer questions if folks have them. Oh, thank you. I love Haven Herbs too, Cass. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer some more questions. We've got a few more minutes. Oh, yay. I'm glad you're an aspiring herbalist. The world needs more herbalists. So I am so glad. And I'm glad that you're motivated to grow. For the longest time, I was trained as an herbalist in California when I lived there. And I was an urban herbalist. I was living in cities. I lived most of my adult life in cities, and I never grew the herbs that I use to make medicine. I just started at the medicine making process. And I have to tell you, there is a huge leap in knowledge about the plants when you start them and live with them and tend them and harvest them and make them into medicine. It just adds a huge dimension to that knowledge. So I'm glad that you're going to go and grow your own. The name of the place in Athens for herbs is Companion Plants. And they have a website, but you can also go to the form that I have. It lists everything that they have, and you can pre-order and I can bring them back for you. So either you go on a fun field trip down to Athens, or if you don't have the time to do that, I will be bringing things back in late April. I'm actually going on the 30th. So the latest of April, and bringing it back, and then folks can pick them up. And then sometime after Mother's Day, you can put them in the ground. All right, 2 more minutes, folks. Any more questions? Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. I actually am teaching this class again in a more developed way on a sliding scale for root and rhizome that way. April 2nd. So if you want a more deep dive, this was a broad overview. If you want a more deep dive, it's a 2-hour class. It's pay what you can. You can go to resourcesanctuary.com and register for that class.
Well, Lily, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and your expertise. I mean, every time you teach a class, I always learn so much more and you just blow me away. But we are very thankful for your continuing to volunteer and partner with Cancer Support Community Central Ohio. And Lily will be back on April the 25th at 9 a.m. on Zoom again for spring cleaning. And one of the things when I talk about the natural living workshop, during our newcomer welcome, I always reference that Lily always helps us to identify those chemicals and toxins in the world around us and how to live a safer and more toxin-free life. So hopefully your schedules permit you to come and join us on April the 25th. And once again, Lily, thank you so very much for the wonderful knowledge that you have shared with us today.
Well, thank you. It's always,
Thanks, Lauren.
I love what Cancer Support Community does. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.